Now, one thing, guys, I do want to mention also, I think, Eric, you mentioned this about enforcing the sticky stuff, and we'll get to Herman in a second, through spin rates. And if you were watching Fair Territory a few weeks ago, I actually got into this and why the league is so resistant to using spin rates to determine enforcement and whether a pitcher is illegally using sticky stuff. And there are a few reasons for it. One, there's no baseline. So if you took the baseline of each pitcher right now, you might be getting a couple of guys who are cheating right now, and it wouldn't be a proper baseline. The other thing, or other things, are that with spin rates, they're variable throughout a game, and often they diminish throughout a game. They can be affected by a number of factors: pitcher's mechanics that day, weather, all kinds of things. And generally, they do go down as the game progresses, as you would expect. So, what happens if a pitcher's spin rate stays relatively steady throughout the course of a game? Is he cheating? So you put all of this together, and I'm simplifying it to a degree, and the league just feels that that is not a proper way to measure and enforce, that the umpires would have the best feel for it. Now, all the things Jose was saying about Herman and the difficulty of knowing what is proper and what is not proper, these are points Max Scherzer has raised on this show and to reporters as well. That is something that is really difficult for pitchers and players in general, and getting a feel for this is not going to be easy. And we've seen it's not going to be easy. At the same time, it's not like there's an ejection every day. We've seen a few egregious ones in the umpire's judgment this year, and it seems to me that 95, 98% of the pitchers seem to have this figured out. So, yeah, I get what Jose is saying, and he raises some really good points about the unknown, about players not really understanding what the line is. But at the same time, most pitchers, as I said, seem to be finding their comfort zone within these new enforcement rules.
But can you tell? Like, I tried to read the body language. I was actually watching both games. To me, it felt like Scherzer was sitting there going, "No, I've done nothing wrong. Why on earth would you, like, you can't do this?" And Mingo was kind of like, Domingo was like, oh, "Okay, like, yeah, I hear what you're
Well,
saying."
those are two different personalities, too, Eric. And you kind of have to take into account Max's more volatile personality from what we've seen in the past. And Max did feel and still feels like he was doing nothing wrong. The umpires determined otherwise, and they determined that he was using sticky stuff, or at least rosin to the point where it was too sticky. And Max said he mixed it with alcohol and all of this, and he did it in the clubhouse. Well, you're not supposed to do it in the clubhouse. Now, Max would say, I've brought this up to him. Hey, what are we doing here? I got to go now with the pitch clock on. I've got to go in the back of the mound every time I feel that my hands need the rosin. All reasonable points, but there are certain lines you can't cross. And it seems to me that these few pitchers who have crossed it, they've crossed it in a pretty big way. Now, we could agree to disagree on some of this, but at the same time, if the problem was so pronounced, we'd be seeing ejections every day. We're not.
Here's why I think it's pronounced, because I think it's an ump thing. It's like going to class and there's some teachers that are more lenient because we're not using any type of science. Like we test for PEDs, we use the same tests. We're going off hands of adults that are going, well, yeah, okay. I think there's certain ump crews or human beings that think something feels stickier than it is or just want to enforce the rules harder. And now, just like you look at guys' strike zones, right? Every hitter, every catcher, they know, oh, this guy, he calls the high strike more. His zone's a little wider. Hey, watch out. This guy checks for sticky shit. So let's like really scrub the hands down each time we come on. That's the human element that I think sucks because it could bite you at any moment. So I don't like that part. Do you feel like there's any issues there where the umps are getting too much of a responsibility to police this?
Scott, I like your point, and I would even further it by saying here's a sport that looks to quantify everything, and this is the one area where we're going to still let it be subjective. That doesn't seem to be consistent with the league's thinking on many, many other matters where they're throwing data at us left and right. At the same time, I've had the issues explained with using spin rates, and they seemed like logical explanations to me on why spin rates were kind of flawed when judging whether a pitcher is using sticky stuff. And Scott, you're absolutely right. This is going to vary from umpire to umpire, just as strike zones vary from umpire to umpire. And maybe that's just part of the process now players have to go through, knowing certain guys will flag you, Phil Cuzzy, and certain guys maybe will take a more lenient approach. It's not perfect. No one should suggest it's perfect. At the same time, let's go back to the beginning, too. If the pitchers were not using sticky stuff to excessive points and effectively cheating, as they were for the past several years leading up to the enforcement, we wouldn't be here in the first place. And I'll give you another point, and this is more in the players' favor. If the league could develop a ball that had enough stick to it, as they have in Japan, as we seem to be unable to do here with all our science, then that would be a way to eliminate the problem as well. And I don't understand why we can't get to that point. It's baffling to me
Wait.
we're still looking at this.
Wait, you said the players are using the sticky stuff. Like, so you're saying coaches, there was definitely not a team that coaches were like, oh, here's what we have. Like, there's other people that are culpable in this situation. It's not just no.
I don't know. I understand that, Eric. But the
no
pitchers
front
were,
office.
right. No. All true. All true. And front offices were turning a blind eye, as they often have in situations like this. Steroid era, another example. More egregious in certain respects. But ultimately, the pitchers were the ones making the choices to do it. And yeah, there were people behind it and people suggesting. I'm not going to dispute that one bit. It was going on. But, I mean, come on. That's where the play was. It's like guys stepping out. It's a little bit of a stretched analogy, but when guys were stepping out all the time and taking their time at the plate, ultimately that's their responsibility. It's not the coaches or anybody else's.
Yep.
That's my thing. I know we're going hard on this, but James Hoy after the game, the crew chief, saying it definitely wasn't Rosin. I don't necessarily disagree. I don't know. He's the only one that gets to feel the hands and know. But I'm like, it's kind of throwing an accusation out there. And also the sticky conversation has been shown and demoed that you can make your hands sticky as hell just with rosin and sweat. That's why, for me, I'm understanding this case more because we're talking to multiple players a day and they're saying the same things over and over. So I don't know. That's the part that drives me nuts.
The accusation by Hoy, well, when he ejects him, that's the accusation. So that's his explanation for the accusation, effectively. And again, I'm not suggesting that there aren't alternate points here that are very fair. And there's a discussion to be had. There is. There's no question there's a discussion to be had. And maybe there's a balance that can be reached between using spin rates to some effect, using umpire's judgment to some combination. It gets complicated, I know. But the league needs to keep looking at this and needs to keep refining its methods of enforcement.